It's time once again for another thrilling episode of Markout Radio. For the next hour, sit back, pull the stick out of your ass, and enjoy. Be warned though, smarks and internet know-it-alls will be offended, annoyed, and generally pissed off at what's about to happen to your ear holes. You've been warned. Now, Markout Radio.
That's right. Welcome back to Markout Radio. Dark Fox with you. Another Sunday. Yeah. If you go back and retroactively watch this, you'll never know. So I'm just going to go ahead and blow up my own spot. Last week I was sick as a dog and decided that, fuck it, I can't hardly talk. I'm not going on the air. The week before I could barely go on the air. As some of you rightly pointed out, it sounded like my voice was dying by the end, which I'm sure was a blessing. That's fine. Whatever. I can take it. All right. Welcome back to Markout Radio Goes Nitro, Episode 3. Back, way back. September 18, 1995, Johnson City, Tennessee. Hosted, of course, by Eric Bischoff, Bobby the Brain Heenan, and Steve Mongo McMichael. With a whole bunch of Gene Okerlund in the ring, which I guess is sort of a blessing and a curse sometimes. I love Gino, but he can be a little much. Dark matches this week. Jesus, fuck. The dark matches are practically their own goddamn Nitro. Dark match, State Patrol. That would be their Sergeant Slaughter ripoffs. Lieutenant James Earl and Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker defeated Colonel Robert Parker and Dick Slater. Another dark match, Randy Savage defeats the Zodiac, so the Battle of the Hogan Buddies. Arn Anderson defeats Dave Sullivan. That's right. Little Big Sullivan. Making his way up slow up the card. And last dark match, Eddie Guerrero defeats Dean Malenko. Now that was a return bout from a previous week. Went 10 minutes, 30 seconds. Insanity. Insanity in the fucking pre-show. Absolute insanity. Especially considering it was longer than any match on the actual fucking show. So, welcome to the 90s. Alright, anyways. Show kicks off with Bischoff on a bump and putting over McMichael's stupid dog, Pepe. I know it's wrong of me to hope that ancient drowned rat pisses on Mongo, who asks us to make sure to get Grandma out of the bathroom to watch the show tonight. What? The fuck does that even... Jesus Christ. Mean Gene backstage interviews Sullivan and the Giant. They arrive in the back of an ambulance and they're reading cue cards really poorly, being held above the camera. They're going to put Hogan in the ambulance or something. I don't know. It was really, really bad. Like, really quite bad. It was campy even for WCW in the 90s, alright? Let's just put it like that. Oh, wait, we gotta kill the WCW Nitro music. We gotta kill that, because you know what ends up happening now? That's right. The American Males. The most homoerotic tag team of all human history. Why am I playing this theme song? Well, first of all, why not? But also, because on September 18, 1995, they get the belts. Anyways, Marcus Alexander Bagwell and Scotty Riggs defeat Harlem Heat, Booker T, and Stevie Ray with Sister Sherry, who were the champions, to win the WCW World Tag Team Championships in 4 minutes 40. And as much as I fucking smart-assly go over on the American Males, this was like a big deal. And like we've covered before, like Bagwell was thrown into this tag team to sort of build him up a little bit, a la Shawn Michaels. And unfortunately, the match itself really only gets a 1 out of 5 for me. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm kind of sorry. Okay, I'm not really that sorry. But let's go into why it gets a 1 out of 5. So first of all, at the beginning of the match, Mongo calls the American Males cuties. That's, all right. Anyways, let's leave that one just hanging out there in the uncomfortable ethos. The Harlem Heats got the belts last night at the pay-per-view. They dropped Bobby Eaton on the ramp to get into the ring to drop the belts to the males. The Blue Bloods were originally booked here, but Bischoff wanted to put the males over as the new, edgier, and sexier rockers. I puked a little bit in my mouth there. Long-term plan is to give Marcus Bagwell some time to develop and then have him barbershop rigs before going on a singles runs to directly mimic Shawn Michaels' career. But remember, they aren't at war with the WWE, WF yet. So that's purely coincidental. It's a total coincidence. Don't look to Bischoff's 83 Weeks podcast and look for any consistencies here. Or his fucking conspiracies result in cash, whatever the fuck his stupid book was called. That was purely coincidence. They weren't at war yet. Total coincidence that they were trying to build up, Bagwell, just like Shawn Michaels. And no, it's a total coincidence. Happenstance happens all the time in wrestling. Sometimes things just happen. People have the same ideas at the same time, or directly 5 years later to the day or something like that. But, total coincidence. Not at war yet. Anyways, this idea, thankfully, blissfully, was abandoned after Hall and Nash arrived and started contributing to booking. Gee, I wonder why. Why would Marcus Bagwell's Shawn Michaels ripoff build cease the minute that two other members of the Clique... Oh, right. That's why. Because they probably pointed out what a fucking lame-ass swerve it was. Anyways, idea was completely abandoned. Eventually, Bagwell would barbershop rigs, but in a total buzz-killing way that turned Bagwell into a glorified mid-carder for the rest of his career. It really didn't matter to him. If you read his book, which it's arguably an autobiography. If you pay attention to how books are written, though, you'll see that it's ghostwritten. But whatever. He didn't really care. He was making at the beginning of this whole run, he was making like 120. By the end of this run, when he was part of the NWO and jobbing to people left, right, and center, he was making, allegedly, according to him, I can't find... I honestly, I did look. But I couldn't find confirmation that he was making $500,000 a year like he claims, but whatever. Anyways, usually people that make $500,000 a year for, 3 or 4 years, unless they're blowing it, which is entirely possible, I guess probably wouldn't go into prostitution, allegedly. I mean, he's just a gigolo. That doesn't mean that he actually fucks these ladies that he goes out with, does it? Yeah, I'll just leave that one in the air uncomfortably as well. Anyways, Brain and Mongo tried to explain the rationale behind this match, but this was the first of many odd last-minute booking moves that Bischoff and Hogan dreamt up on the fly. Booker T and Stevie Ray were traditionally trained, and while putting the males over, they took every chance to shoot, specifically on Riggs, who reportedly politicked to get this booking in the first place. Bagwell would later become an insufferable douchebag, but at this point in his career, he was still really green, and he was trained properly, and while he didn't fight against the booking, he didn't really do much to stop it. Word was that Bischoff wanted the belts on the males, but Bunkhouse and Slater refused to put them over. So instead, the program was switched to them Bunkhouse and Slater dropping the belts to the Harlem Heat, who were popular in the locker room and over with the boys and the crowd. And then Bischoff gave Booker and Stevie Ray a bonus to job to the males by having Bagwell reverse scoop slam by Booker T into a fast count pin after Colonel Parker came out and carried Sherry off for some plowing? Anyways, the reason why this got 1 out of 5 for me anyways was that it wasn't the first example of this kind of nonsense. This is very synonymous with wrestling in general, but it was one of those really clear times in history when it just goes too far. Like the booking has gone to that point where they're just going to book it on the fly because they want X, Y, and Z to happen. There's no chance to build it. There's no chance to sell tickets for it. There's no chance to put it over. And of course, the males run as tag team champions did not last very long. Didn't really get over. Despite them being huge baby faces and 90s pretty, they really didn't get over very well with the crowd. Like, you would expect them to get over a little bit better, but of course, because they were so fucking crazy, it never did translate to fans really getting on board, because at this point in history, in the 90s, adults really weren't watching wrestling the way that adults watch wrestling now. It was more of a kids thing, and then like some adults would watch it as like a guilty pleasure, but keep it on the down low. Not like today, of course, where you see full-grown 50-year-old men getting in Twitter fights with fucking wrestlers, but whatever. After this, Mean Gene has an in-ring interview with Ric Flair to discuss the loss to Arn Anderson and to promote the main event, so the loss from last week. Flair said ass on live TV, at which point there was going to be a $5,000 fine leveled against Turner Broadcasting anyways. But at the time, the fine was $5,000 for every 3 swear words that were not in Carlin's list. So for ass, they had 2 more kicks at the can without needing to pay another fine. So later on in the night, Flair would swear again. After that is a WCW promo for Saturday night. After that, Paul Orndorf defeats Johnny B. Bad in 6 minutes 40. I gave that one 1 out of 5 as well. It was ultimately kind of a disappointing match. But anyways, Orndorf comes out with a cheap ripoff of the narcissist Lex Luger's old WWF entrance, except instead of a full mirror, he walks out with a handheld mirror. And of course, Orndorf at this point had that really fluffy 80s leftover hair. Anyways, Orndorf had a muscle degenerative disease in his right arm that went untreated while feuding with Hogan the WWF years before, and most of the strength in that right arm was gone. Now, he had a few more years left on his current deal with Bischoff, and Bischoff wanted him to stay at home. Instead, Orndorf, being an old school worker, came up with this change to his gimmick. He contacted several self-help gurus he knew who came in and did unpaid guest spots to put over the gimmick as narcissist personality. And essentially he wrestled in the mid-card to put over new guys for the rest of his career. Mark Marrow, as we know him from WWF, Johnny B. Bad here, got into a shoving match after his match the previous night. And as punishment, Hogan, the judge in the Wrestler's Court backstage at the time, sentenced him to lose to Orndorf, who he liked and respected. So the up-and-coming Johnny B. Bad, who looks fantastic, is going to job to the old and diseased wrestler as punishment for getting into a shoot-shoving match in his match the previous night on the pay-per-view. So, anyway, sad as it is to admit, obviously, I was a bit of a Johnny B. Bad mark at the time. Now, in my defense, he does have a great look, and he did do a decent promo as the whole Little Richard kind of boxer gimmick, whatever. But ultimately what killed his career was when he came over to the WWF. He lost the Johnny B. Bad gimmick because that was property of WCW. And because Vince was unsure of what to do with him, he just put him in similar ring gear with the similar gimmick, but under his real name. And then Vince met his wife. Sable became one of Vince's favorites. And by Vince, I mean both Vinces, McMahon and Russo, where she was featured in a lot of the more racier angles until she married Brock Lesnar, who knocked her up and then kept her ass at home. Jesus Christ, that sounded a lot more sexist than I intended to. Oh, well, whatever. Mr. Wonderful got a shoot pin because Bischoff wasn't convinced that Marrow would do the job in the ring and serve his sentence, and Marrow insisted that he was going to kick out of the first one anyways, so, of course, Paul Orndorff's going to have to shoot pin him. 6 minutes 40 is a respectable length match. And if you're being punished for getting to a shoving match with another wrestler shoot style in the middle of the ring, even if Hogan's the judge of the Wrestler's Court, you kind of have to serve your time. I mean, it sucks, but that's the nature of the beast. After that, there's a pre-tape promo. On the day before Fall Brawl, on the other side of the country, we're led to believe that while Macho was repping out 295 pounds like it ain't nothing in front of the Baywatch extras, Kevin Sullivan smashed that 295-pound bar into Macho's throat and then threw him a beating in the sand to be later saved by Ric Flair. You remember Ric Flair, the guy who photoshopped himself into pictures with Liz as part of their 92 WWF storyline. That makes sense, right? Flair would come to Macho Man's rescue on the Baywatch set after Macho has 295 pounds driven into his throat. Yeah, it's all good. Very 90s. Whatever. As a kid, I don't even think as a kid I bought into this, if I'm perfectly honest, because I don't even remember this gimmick or this angle. I do remember that WCW wrestlers were doing a lot of guest spots on popular television shows, but I don't know. I don't remember this scene at all. And when it happened, watching it going, well, first of all, Macho Man's big and he's strong and everything like that, but there's no goddamn way he's repping out 295 like that. There's just no fucking way. Even with the steroids he was on, there's just no fucking way. And then when Kevin Sullivan comes and smashes it, the foam the foam 45s just flip and flopped and all over the place. I think the only thing that was actually real was the bar, because it did come crashing down a little bit. So it's a good thing that they filmed this on sand, because had they filmed this maybe on the boardwalk or on Muscle Beach or something like that, where there'd be like something hard for them to be on, I think maybe those foam things would have shattered. Anyways, back from the pre-tape promo, Mean Gene is in the ring now, and he interviews Macho, who tells us that to kill a snake, you need to decapitate it. Pretty sure that's true about anything. But anyways, he doesn't know two things, but he does know that Hogan is really, really bad judge of character. Can't argue there. Luger is tired of being shit-talked. He comes out in the same clothes he was wearing 3 weeks ago. And the problem with this program is that there was some legit heat between Macho and Lex. And because Liz was dating Luger at the time, and surprised Randy when she showed up for Fall Brawl with Lex. And reportedly the quote-unquote cheap shot Randy referred to in this program was a legit shoot that the cameras were quick to go away from. Bischoff was convinced, though, that legit heat would turn into real-life heat on the air, and instead he booked the two in a program that would go down as one of the more awkward WCW feuds pre-Nash on the booking committee with Russo. After this is a flashback promo to Hogan's bike getting run over by Giant's monster truck, and then Fall Brawl highlights of Hogan's injury when his neck gets snapped or something. You know, the move that Steven Seagal kills people with in movies that only puts Hogan on the shelf with a big-ass neck brace. Because he is Hogan, after all, and he is immortal, after all. Anyways, after that, Ric Flair defeats Fly-In Brian Pillman, who finally has the Fly-In moniker back, in 5 minutes 24. This one actually gave 2.5 out of 5. It was really good. Pillman came out rocking his Hollywood Blondes gear. A few years previously, he and Austin were put together in a mid-card team to bolster the division, and got so over with the fans that the only way to kill them was to shit-can Austin while he was injured and home alone. So while he and Pillman was also out with an injury at the time too. Now, there are some rumors that those injuries themselves were a result of accidentally on purpose incident with the Blue Bloods, Bobby Eaton and Steven Regal, who were legit shoot wrestlers that had been used over the years to facilitate business for the owners of the feds that they were working in. Pillman had a fantastic dropkick reversal over the top rope, series of moves. It was really safe and looked fantastic. Rick wrote that he never once worried about dropkick being a shoot because Pillman never played politics, much to his own detriment. Small package botch in the match here between what that Flair did, which was very, very odd. Flair, at the time, didn't botch a whole lot. Post-match Flair promo where he says ass again. So this is where, you're going to get your deal. So they've got one more if they want to use it. Hopefully they do. Maybe. No, they didn't. That's too bad, though. They should have actually done it. But anyways, like I said, Turner's lawyers did their thing. And because the FCC was overstepping their authority in so many other places, no fine was actually issued for the event. Bischoff would later try to push these boundaries more and more. But after a few key losses in court, he was instructed to cease or he'd be in violation of his own contract. So, still with another 90 seconds of airtime left in the show, the announce team recaps everything that happened during the night and at the pay-per-view again, and promotes the hell out of Sunday Night Main Event with a Luger-Ming match that was that got really no coverage in the end credits. So, there was a flash of their images, but they didn't talk about them at all. So, that's it. That's it for your September 18, 1995 episode of Nitro. I mean, overall, it wasn't bad. I was actually just a little bit disappointed that so many of the good matches ended up in dark matches. It's not as though even you could sit here and say, retrospect being hindsight being 2020, because, okay, you got me there. State Patrol versus Colonel Robert Parker and Dick Slater. That was never going to be an awesome match. That's an absolute dark match. But Randy Savage versus the Beefer, that would have been all right. Granted, it was only 1 minute 30, but that would have been all right. I don't know how long the Dave Sullivan Arn Anderson match would have been, but I think that probably would have been pretty good too. Arn Anderson given the relatively new Dave Sullivan a workout. And then, of course, Eddie Guerrero going over on Dean Malenko in 10 minutes 30. That would have been a fantastic match to see on television. I mean, you could have easily, swapped out the Orndorf Johnny B. Bad match for that. Johnny B. Bad could learn his lesson on a dark match. He doesn't need to be live on television eating a loss. He could eat the loss in a dark match. I guess probably wouldn't have lived up to Hogan's expectations, all right? So, anyways, that's it for this week. See you guys again next week, I suppose. One would hope. Spread the word. Tell your friends and family. We're going back to the fucking 90s in WCW. Watch some wrestling. Make sure to check it out on the network, of course. I'm not getting paid to say that. I'm just saying it. And get yourself all caught up. And don't forget that there's pay-per-views in the middle of all these things that I ain't touching. So have at her. All right, here we go. We're out of here.
Well, that was an abortion of a show. Should the mood take you, check out markoutradio.com and leave a comment. You can also find links there to our Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Stitcher channels. You can even leave a voicemail on our Skype. Just click the links and share them.